Gather round, travelers. In the shadows of the moon, where light and darkness intertwine, there exists a figure both enigmatic and tragic. A warrior bound by fate, his story is one of devotion, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of a purpose. Only he can understand. He is a silent sentinel, his words as few as his breaths, for his path is carved in the echoes of his actions alone. This is not just a tale of war, but of devotion, of a bond that transcends time and the price that must be paid for love and loyalty. The story of Aphelios is the story of a warrior who fights not just for survival, but for something much greater.
I remember the first time I saw him truly, without the veil of innocence that clouded our childhood. Aphelios had always been the one who stood silently, watching the world unfold before him, even though he couldn't see it himself. It was the moon's light that guided him, just as it guides me from a distance. But it wasn't always like this. The jungle was dense with life, its whispers constant, always moving, always shifting. Aphelios and I spent countless days together, hidden in the heart of the jungle where no one could find us. We played, we learned, we grew. But I knew even then that our fates were not our own. It was on the night of the first battle that everything changed.
In the land of Ixtal, where the jungle's pulse beats like the heart of the world, there were born two children under the light of a single moon, Aphelios and Alune, twins, yet not identical. Aphelios, the silent warrior, and Alune, the sister, whose voice would be his guiding light. Their bond was sacred, formed before their birth in the heart of the stars. Alune, blessed with the gift of foresight, could see the future, yet was bound to a fate she could not escape. Aphelios, on the other hand, was gifted with an unparalleled mastery of weapons, each one born from the moon itself. But he was blind to the world around him, but not to the mission he was destined to fulfill. The moon's light was their guide, their path, their burden. Together, they were meant to protect Ixtal from the forces that sought to corrupt it. However, as their lives began to unravel, the cruelty of fate would tear them apart. It began with the arrival of an enemy unlike any the twins had ever known, outsiders from across the world, drawn to the mysticism of Ixtal's ancient power. They came with weapons of strange design, their intentions dark and twisted. They sought to harness the moon's energy, to rip it from the sky itself. Alune could see the danger before it arrived. She warned Aphelios, but her voice was lost in the weight of the moon's pull.
I can still hear it, the sound of the enemy's march, echoing through the dense trees like the footsteps of an unstoppable force. I was afraid, but I had always been afraid for him, for us. Aphelios, in his silence, only nodded when I spoke of the coming danger. "Stay close, Alune," he said. His voice had always been soft, but in those words, I could hear the steel of a man who had already accepted his fate. But I wasn't sure I could stay close. The jungle felt like it was closing in on us. I could feel the presence of the strangers. I knew what was to come. The moon had spoken, but I was no warrior. I could see it, but I couldn't stop it.
The battle was swift and brutal. Aphelios fought with the skill of a master, his weapons, each more deadly than the last, flashing under the moon's cold light. His enemies fell before him, one after another, as if the very night itself had chosen him as its instrument of vengeance. Yet, in the chaos, the moon's light, his guiding force, was tainted. The energy that flowed through his weapons began to twist, and it was in that moment that Aphelios' sight was taken from him, forever.
I saw it. I saw the moment he lost his sight. He was standing, sword in hand, his eyes wide in shock as the moonlight flickered. I heard him gasp, but he couldn't see what had happened. Not in the way I had. I wanted to run to him, but something stopped me. The pain in his expression. I had never seen him in such agony. It wasn't just the loss of his sight. It was as if something deep within him had been severed. Alune. He whispered my name. I remember that moment as if it were yesterday. I'm here, Aphelios, I said, though I knew my voice would never reach him in the same way again. His heart, the very core of him, was so tightly bound to the moon that its curse had rendered him blind to the world around him. I wanted to say more, but I couldn't find the words. And even if I could, what would it have changed?
From that day forward, Aphelios was bound not only by the moon's light, but by its silence. The weapons he wielded became his only means of connection to the world. He could no longer speak with his sister as he once had. The bond that connected them was now a silent one. Alune, though bound to the distant moon herself, would never be able to join him in battle. She could only watch from afar, guiding him when she could, but always knowing that the true fight would be his alone.
I had never felt more helpless. He became a shadow, fighting for a purpose that I could barely understand, never able to hear the cries of his pain, only the quiet click of his weapons as he loaded them. But I knew he fought for us, for me, for Ixtal. He carried the weight of everything on his shoulders, a burden he bore with grace, even when I could feel the cracks in his resolve. I saw the moon's light flicker within him, always there, always, guiding. But it had changed him. Aphelios, my twin, was no longer the same. And yet, I couldn't leave him. I couldn't abandon the bond we shared. No matter the distance, no matter the silence, I knew I would always be his guiding star.
Aphelios's journey was only beginning. He would walk the path of the moon, battling the forces that sought to destroy everything he held dear. With Alune's voice in his heart and the weapons of the faithful in his hands, he would carry on. His destiny, bound to the moon, would see him through the darkest of nights.